Hi everyone, this is Veronica. Today our topic of discussion is about space sector and new forces. So we'll discuss here that does India need a new space policy and why we need a new modeling or revamping of our space policy. We'll discuss in detail. For my video updates and queries, you can connect with me on Instagram and Facebook because I feel together we can make a difference. Now see what is the relevance of this topic in your exams. It will be covered in your mains paper 3, and at examination level you should know about what reforms are needed to space sector so that we can leverage it to the commercial purposes. Now, in what context today we are studying this? Because the growing role of private sector and the effort by nations like small nations, especially UAE and Luxembourg, Delhi, that means Indian government, we need to move quickly towards a new model for India's space activity. So as it looks like these small nations are doing so much, we should also try to change. So as I told you about UAE, you should know where in map in Middle East. So these two are very small countries, UAE and the Luxembourg. So this is important from the MCQ point of view also, like it is surrounded by Belgium, France and Germany. So before moving forward, let me tell you, if you have not subscribed to our channel yet and still watching this video, you can subscribe it and press the bell icon so you do not miss any important video from our channel. Now let's start discussing. Talking about the growing presence in the outer space. See, outer space is no longer a preserve for a few, because when we used to talk about earlier about the outer space, just big nations came to our mind. So when we think about outer space, we think of big powers like US, Russia, China, European Space Agency. We might also note that the collective European effort under the European Space Agency, as well as the impressive national space programs of India and Japan. But there is a strategic or a symbol of national pursuit which is associated with the space sector. So these programs have for long been viewed as either strategic or symbols of national prestige for big countries that are prepared to invest significant resources in the pursuit of a credible presence in outer space. So these two small countries challenging the narrative, two small countries which are this United Arab Emirates and Luxembourg, UAE and Luxembourg in Europe, they have begun to demonstrate that the outer space need not to be the playing ground for the two big powers alone. So skeptics right now might be thinking that it is a very pretentious for the UAE. They are very small countries, they should focus on the other things. But with its native population which is very low of barely 1 million, UAE is like the population is barely 1 million, and Luxembourg with 6 lakh people, to think of place for themselves in space. So they are ridiculed, but they are taking steps. So we'll start with UAE, what they are doing. See, UAE, it is especially a reminder for India. The interesting path these two countries have set for themselves in outer space is a reminder that Delhi needs to adapt to the rapidly changing dynamic in outer space. So there is the Hope Mars mission by UAE. The size is not a constraint, so it is reflected in UAE's plan to launch its Mars mission. The name is Hope later this year in the partnership with range of organizations across the world, including 3 universities in US. And Japan is scheduled to launch the UAE Mars probe this year. And even India's ISRO is also working with UAE on its Mars mission. So last year, the first Emirati astronaut, the name was Hala Mansouri. Hala Mansouri, the space astronaut, spent more than a week in the US-Russian space station. So what are the reasons for the UAE space strategy? So it is about cornering a slice of rapidly growing commercial space industry, part of major effort to diversify the UAE economy away from its reliance on hydrocarbons, because otherwise their economy totally depends upon the oil export and all. So they are trying to have a shift. Now next we'll talk about Luxembourg, that how Luxembourg is increasing its presence in the outer space. So firstly, the commercial space is a major opportunity. That means over the years, Luxembourg moved away from its past reliance on the steel industry. So initially, its dependence was more on the steel industry to become a center of European banking and finance. So now it is now looking for commercial space as a major opportunity. So there are regulatory steps also, like Luxembourg has taken a number of regulatory steps to create a very vibrant ecosystem for space companies, ranging from their satellite operations to future extraction of resources from asteroids and other space objects. And then they're also trying to expansion of space sector. By that I mean that at the moment the space sector accounts for nearly 2% of Luxembourg's GDP. So there are more than around 50 companies and 2 public research organizations that are driving the expansion of space sector in Luxembourg. So it entered the space sector only in the middle of the last decade. So it is also driven by the need of economic diversification. So talking about that, they are bringing in new ideas. So UAE and Luxembourg, they have a reputation that they build up new ideas to transcend the limitations of their size in the world. But obviously space adventure was not possible without the structural changes that are reshaping the global space activity. So how space industry underwent a change over the years. So talking about the evolution of this space industry, see, preserve of national programs. Initially, through the second half of the 20th century, outer space was sole preserve of national space program. That means the government of the countries used to have full hold over it. Okay, so that means that these programs are driven by government funding, direction and management. But then we saw the emergence of the private sector. So as military uses of space and prestige projects like moon landing emerged, major private sectors entities already in the aviation industry, like you have Boeing, you have Lockheed. Okay, they won many space contracts in US. Then they collaborated with the government also. So the Pentagon and NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, told these companies what to do, that you should collaborate with the government. So here we can talk about expansion. The last decades of 20th century, it saw significant expansion of satellite-based telecommunication. We saw telecommunication, we saw navigation, we saw broadcasting, we saw mapping, and it lent a significant commercial dimension to the space sector. So as the digital revolution in the 21st century, it transformed the world economy. The commercial space sector has begun to grow in leaps and bounds. And talking about the global space business is now estimated to be around $400 billion, and we are expecting that it will rise to at least $1 trillion by 2040. So then we have seen the rise of SpaceX. So one example is the rise of private sector companies in the space sector. So main is SpaceX, run by the US entrepreneur Elon Musk. So hired for a resupply. So this company was hired for a resupply mission for the space station. So it now launches more rockets every year than NASA. So the entry of the private sector has begun to drive down the cost per launch. So how private sector is helping? The cost per launch is getting low. It is reducing through innovations such as reusable rockets. So we can see there is scope of expansion. Still there is scope of expansion in this industry. This industry is growing like this. So there is decrease in launch cost and rise in ambition. That means as launch costs came down, the private sector has become more ambitious. Internet through space. So how it is helping? For example, SpaceX plans to launch hundreds of satellites into low Earth orbit. Okay, LEO, low Earth orbit, in order that they can provide internet services. For example, Amazon, they have also plans to build a network of more than 3,000 satellites in the low Earth orbit. Then we have space tourism. How it is helping? Like Musk and Amazon, Jeff Bezos, they have plans to develop space tourism and build human settlements on the moon and the Mars. So maybe in the coming years, for a vacation, you might be going to the moon, you might be going to the Mars. So these are like expansions. They can happen in near future. Then small private companies in the fray. That means it is not just the big companies that are aiming for the moon. Last year there was a private company in Israel. They sent a lunar lander, okay, to the moon. Although the lander crashed, much like India's Vikram, the private sector has begun to do things that were once the monopoly of national agencies. Now we'll come to our country, India, which we feel is not in synchronization with the global changes. How? Because we are not adapting to the change. India is, however, quite some distance away from adapting to the unfolding changes in the global space business. How? In its earlier years, Indian space programs that were constrained by lack of resources, they found innovative ways to getting ahead in space. Then space sector is dominated by the government, that is another thing. Because although the ISRO encourages private sector participation in national space program, its model is still very much 20th century program in terms of government domination. So we need to correct this. So to conclude this, I must say that it looks at the growing role of private sector and the effort by nations like UAE, Luxembourg. India needs to move more quickly towards new model for India's space activity. We need a regulatory environment that should encourage more dynamic role so that there is no government domination, whereas private sector also has some say. So India is among the global leaders in space exploration, and like ISRO has spearheaded India's success in space. These include various satellite launch, space launch vehicles, and a range of associated capabilities. But the private sector has not contributed much to it. So India is, however, lagging in harnessing the power of private innovation in the space domain. So this not only limits the exploitation of space for economic development, but it has serious national security implications also. Then how we will balance them in future, that is a question. For that we need a policy that is strict and flexible at the same time, so that the government and private sector, they can collaborate and work together for the space sector. Okay, so this is all about today's lecture. If you have any queries, you can connect with me on social media, or you can get the PDF of this lecture on my Telegram, that is t.me/Veronica_Om, or you can just search Veronica Study IQ. Thank you. So this is the channel Study IQ. If you're preparing for UPSC or any government exam, our pen drive and tablet courses are available. If you're preparing for UPSC CSE 2020, our pen drive course is available, where you can find 100% coverage of UPSC vast syllabus. Daily current affair updates will be available. Self-paced learning process is provided. This course has been prepared by top faculties of Study IQ, and now you can purchase this course at Rs 625 per month only. For additional information, you can visit our site, and there are the phone numbers also given. You can call them and gain the additional information. You can connect with me for my video updates on Instagram and Facebook, because I feel together we can make a huge difference. For queries, you can even email me. Thank you so much.